All right, so today what we're going to do is Perek Zayin. We're going to do different parts of the 7th chapter, which is a follow-on from the previous chapters, and let's just summarize. So the previous chapter we learned, so in the first chapter the Alter Rebbe said that tshuva, definite tshuva, is just abandoning the transgression, abandoning the Aveira, right? And that's all it is really, and even other things just come afterwards, they're really directed towards achieving atonement, right? Then he went off and he talked, I said I didn't do this inside, but I spoke about, he talked about the idea of fasting and when you do fast, don't fast, and so on. Then he came to, last week we did the part where he discussed tshuva a more esoteric way, and the Zohar says that tshuva is tashuv hay, to return the hay, and he had this whole idea where essentially where nowadays if a person does a various, even serious transgressions, what we end up doing, rather than severing right, we talk about the neshama being a part of Hashem and the whole story, and what happens is that the life energy of the neshama comes through speech, although its origin is the idea of blowing from the essence of Hashem, but it comes through speech, but a more deeper form of speech, what we call pnimius hadibur, which is the hay of Yudkei Vavkei, which is like the hay is like the air that brings forth all the external speech. That's where the neshama sort of passes through. But when we do things that we're not supposed to do, particularly in those transgressions that the Torah refers to as kores or capital punishment, things like that, instead of severing the connection as they did at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, and that would affect their longevity, what we do is we actually schlep the hay into Golos, into the Klippa, and therefore what happens is we start getting our life force, and sometimes it can be a very big life force, we start getting it from the world of Klippa rather than from the world of Kedusha, as we said, and that's part of the idea of the Shekhinah being in Golos, Hashem's presence being in Golos with us, and so on, and therefore the idea of tshuva on a very basic level is tashuv hay. Got to return back the hay, we've got to reconnect the hay, and which also means on a deeper level to restore our relationship with Hashem in an internal way, where we get our life force straight from the Nefesh Elokis, from the Gandhi soul, and so on. So that was the whole explanation that we talked about last year. Now he says like this surgeon's warning. This chapter is sharp. Okay, it's a difficult chapter. No, I mean it's not sharp. It's a heavy chapter, which we'll try and unpack a bit. He says, "V'ulam." However, let's get practical. Derech ha'emes v'hayoshar. The true and correct, upright way. Libchinas tshuva tato, for this lower level of tshuva. Now, we're not even talking about a very deep level of tshuva. We're talking about the lower level of tshuva, which is hey tato hanal, reconnecting the second hay, the lower hay of the Hashem's name. How do you get there? What's the pathway? Hem beis dvarim derech klal. It's two things. You need two things. I want to just stop on the. Sorry, the paper I've given you, we'll just do it like those parts inside, not everything, but like we're doing on one, right? There are two things generally. So now, he said, emes v'hayoshar. Emes and yashar. What does that mean? The true and straight path. And also, what does he want? Didn't he just explain in Perek Aleph, right? In Perek Aleph he said, and I'll just bring up the quote again here. I mentioned at the beginning of the shir, but in Perek Aleph he defined tshuva, and he said, the Alter Rebbe was very clear, that tshuva means aziva sachet, just to abandon the transgression. Commit not to doing it again, right? Not even vidui, not a long process. He brought a halachic source that we see that people can have a thought of tshuva and can become a tzaddik right away. Obviously it needs a process to internalize it, but that's tshuva. And he did add something, which I highlighted last week, I think, that he did make it a bit more difficult than that. In other words, it's not just abandoning that particular transgression, it's abandoning being distant from Hashem altogether, right? So essentially, tshuva was, I'm sorry, I regret having done A, B, and C. I commit not just to not doing it, but I commit to restoring my dedication and commitment to Hashem in general. Okay, so that was the tshuva, right? And then he went on and explained the whole Kabbalistic thing about the tshuva and the hay and all that. And now he's coming back and he's saying, hold on, but there's a journey here. So the question is, why is there a journey? He just said, all you have to do is recommit to Hashem. And, okay, deep commitment, a commitment that we want to listen to Hashem, not only in this particular mitzvah that I messed up on, but in general, because as we said last week, when we mess up on a particular mitzvah, it actually shows a weakening in our general relationship with Hashem. So that's fine, we understand that. So therefore, tshuva is not just abandoning that particular transgression, but it's actually recommitting to the general commitment to Hashem. Now he's saying it's a bit of a journey, and you need two things. And he uses the word emes and yasher, true and straight. So the reason for this is as follows, as the Rabbi explains in different places. Because what the Alter Rebbe was really saying before is a phrase we call Kabbalas oil. Kabbalas oil means accepting upon ourselves the yoke of heaven, right? Obedience. However, there's different levels of obedience. In other words, there's a level of obedience which is it's an external thing. It's not deep. In other words, it's obedience. The person is either afraid of Hashem or he wants to have a good year or whatever the case is, right? So he recommits to Hashem. Kabbalah soul, okay, I'm going to keep all the mitzvahs, I'm going to try my best, I'm going to listen to you, etc., etc. But the question is, has that affected his essential soul? Is it deep? Right? You can have an eved, you can have a slave, you can have a worker that just says, yeah, I'm going to do whatever the king tells me to do, because he's the boss, he's in charge, I don't have much of a choice, kind of thing, right? Now, that would still be a tshuva, and that's still a tshuva that the Alter Rebbe talks about in the beginning of Tanya. That's aziva sachet, that's abandoning this transgression and recommitting to be committed and subservient and obedient to the king, to Hashem. It is tshuva, it'll do the trick. But how sustainable it is, number one, and also how deep is it? Is it going to the core of your relationship with Hashem? Is it really doing that? Right? Is it connecting yourself to Hashem? So what he wants to do in this chapter is he wants to show how to do it in a way, it's the same principle. It's a rededication to Hashem, it's a rededication to listen to Hashem, whatever he's going to do, but it's deeper. In other words, it's the same principle. It's still tshuva tato. It's still a lower level of tshuva. A high level of tshuva is a very deep relationship. But this is still a basic relationship with Hashem, but it's a deep relationship. In other words, it's a functional relationship. It's about doing the mitzvahs, and it's about being dedicated to Hashem, His Torah and His Shulchan Aruch and so on. But it's affecting us. It's affecting us deeply, which means it'll be more real. It's more of a relationship, and it'll last longer, right? And he breaks it up into two things, the emes and the yasher. This is spoken about by the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, true and straight. And he talks about there's a chesed aspect to it, and there's a gvura aspect to it, which we're going to see. There's about arousing compassion for the soul and being a little bit tough on the animal soul, as we'll soon see how that works. But there's two components. That's the idea of it. That's the concept of this parak, right? In other words, it's a tshuva, which is the same tshuva he spoke about before, but it's coming from what we call the pnimius of the person. It's coming from the inside of the person, from the soul, right? Not just a superficial commitment because I'm scared or because Hashem's big or whatever the case is. Right. And even that is a tshuva, but not what we want to try to achieve. She says the following. Ha'alef, what's the first thing? La'oireir rachamim ha'elyonim mimkoir ha'rachamim, to arouse rachamim, mercy, from the source of all mercy, right? Al nishmasai v'nafshay lekis, on our neshama, meaning our nefesh lekis, shenofla me'igra rama, that fell from a very, very high building, which is Chaya Chaim Baruch Hu, the source of all life, Hashem, lebira amikta, to a very low pit, right? Hein heicholis hatuma v'sitra achra. These are the chambers of impurity and sitra achra. So we know B'chlal, even before a person does anything wrong, that's an issue. The neshama came down very low. The neshama was doing very well before it came to this body. It was closer to Hashem. Not that it can't gain from this body, but it was doing okay. As Alter Rebbe says many places in Tanya, the neshama didn't come down for its own purpose, for its own tikkun. It came down to elevate the world, elevate the person, the nefesh habamis, the body of the person, the world of the world that the person is involved in, and so on. And we have this mashal, the analogy that's spoken about many times in Chassidus, that it came from Igro Rama, from a very high roof to a very low pit. Meaning you can sometimes fall down from a not such high roof to not such low pit, but this is the highest of the high to the lowest of the low.
So the neshama doesn't need a tikkun?
No. Before we mess it up, that is. Right? Before we but it's still trapped. Even before it needs it, right? In other words, the neshama didn't come here because it needed to be fixed.
It needed to do the fixing.
It needed to do the fixing, right? And it will gain. So there's two phrases. The neshama doesn't need a tikkun, but there is yeridat tzarech aliyah. The descent of the neshama is for the purpose of an elevation. Yes, the neshama will gain. Because this is why this is a bit off in a tangent. It doesn't matter. Let me just explain. So in Pirkei Avos it says Bal korcha chatachai, that we get born against our will, meaning because the neshama is not interested. So Hashem forces it to come down, right? And then it says, but the problem with that is it says afterwards, Bal korcha chatameis, against the will you die. So if it's talking about the neshama, surely the neshama should celebrate on the day of death, like, okay, time for me to get out of here, right? But it's not that way, because once the neshama lives in and understands the great benefit that it has from overcoming struggle and from taking an environment that is resistant to Hashem and nevertheless it's able to do a mitzvah and so on and so forth, and you can only do mitzvahs in this world, and the connection to Hashem through physical mitzvahs is unbelievably high, as it says in Chassidus, so many places, and so on. Okay, so I doesn't want to leave it at the end either, but originally it comes down against its will, right?
Isn't reincarnation a tikkun?
Yeah, but why? But it's a tikkun, but not an elevation. It's a tikkun for the stains of the soul through our various. So that's reincarnation. It could be one of the reasons of reincarnation. But the neshama is not interested in tikkun. The neshama wants to be higher and realize the opportunity in this world. It loses, as soon as the neshama is left, it loses an opportunity. Can't do a mitzvah anymore.
But it's not sent down.
You mean it's sent down again? Yeah, sometimes. But okay, that's a different journey of how the neshama is cleansed afterwards. That's a different story. But yeah, sometimes it's coming down. It's not only because of tikkun, not only because of punishment. It's because also sometimes, like the Alter Rebbe says later in Tanya, that we can't do all the mitzvahs in this world. There's mitzvahs for men, mitzvahs for women, mitzvahs for Kohanim, Levim, Israel, out of Israel. That's why the neshama keeps coming back to do all the different mitzvahs, right? Or there's a particular mitzvah that this neshama needs to still do. Whatever the case is, but that's when the neshama comes down. But in the meantime, it's resistant. And when it goes up there and it sees what's, then it gets comfortable there, it doesn't want to come down again. So, yeah. But the neshama down here is trapped. It's a godly soul, but it's trapped in the guf. It's fell down to a very low level, and particularly, because he's talking about tshuva, after we've messed it up a little bit, right? After we've done what we shouldn't do, we all fail. And therefore it's a big rachmanis on the neshama, right? So the yearning to reconnect with Hashem, part of that, stage one of that, is to ask Hashem. That's why we do this in the davening all the time, and especially in Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. We ask for rachamim, we ask for compassion, we ask for mercy. We highlight the necessity for mercy, for compassion. We highlight the necessity, and we highlight the pain of the neshama, activating a yearning within the person to reconnect and to get out of this mess and to connect to Hashem in a pure way, and so on and so forth, right? And it's a very strong yearning, it's a very strong level of compassion that we draw down, which is why in Yom Kippur we say the 13 principles of Rachamim all the time, right? The 13 attributes of mercy, that's what we do. Because Hashem is Rachum, and so in other words, it's two things really. We are activating Hashem's mercy, but we're also activating the necessity. Now we're highlighting why you need compassion, right? Because the highlighting the necessity for compassion activates the neshama to yearn stronger and to get out of its incarceration, so to speak. Not to die. I mean, in other words, to get out of its constraints coming from what we've done wrong, right? And not only do we need to do that, but we need to understand and feel, right? This is, in other words, it's not just about the neshama, it's about us. In other words, it's us understanding what the neshama is going through, which will activate in us a greater yearning, right? Yeah. Not only do we have to feel that pain of the neshama and feel the necessity for the rachamim, the rachmanis, so to speak, on the neshama for being so trapped, but even al mekoira b'mkoira chayim, we also have to arouse the compassion and feel the pain of the source of the neshama, which is the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Like it says in the pasuk, "V'yoshuv el Hashem v'yirachameyu." Return to Hashem and He'll have mercy on us. In other words, l'oira rachamim, to arouse this compassion. Al hashpah Shem Havai Baruch Hu, on the flow coming from Yud Kei Vav Kei, shenishtalshula v'yorda teichei cholis, which had to evolve through an evolutionary process, come down all the way down to sitra acharat meim al dei ma'aseh enesh v'tach b'loisov, through the actions of man and all his schemes, machshavosav arois, all his bad intentions. Like we said, like it says in the pasuk, Melech Osir Beratim, that Hashem is sometimes like a king that is chained in chains, right? Where's he trapped in us? Which is the concept of the golus of the Shechina canal that like we said before, the idea of Hashem, even especially now in golus, right? Where we schlep Hashem into the golus with us. So we're going to feel that pain. And when we feel that pain, we feel that yearning. When we feel that yearning, we arouse the rachamim from Hashem. It's part of the tshuva. We arouse rachamim from Hashem from a very high level. Right? What does rachamim mean? To read, just to remind you, rachamim is a combination. Rachamim is tiferes. It's very, very deep. It's almost a combination of chesed and gevura. Chesed means you just give. It doesn't matter who's deserving, who's not deserving. Gevura means you only give to who deserves. Rachamim is understanding the person is undeserving and yet we still give. That's higher than, that comes from a very deep place. That Hashem transcends din. Hashem transcends, the seder ishtalshalus. That comes from a very high level. That's the Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim. Yeah, because really, logically, if we do something wrong, the system dictates that we're in trouble. Because Hashem created a system in this world. He created a logical, rational system. And there's din, there's gevura, there's justice, right? Which is the principle of Yom HaDin, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur's Day of Judgment, right? But the Medrash tells us, not on Rosh Hashanah, by the way, this is a general thing, but it's highlighted there. Medrash tells us, for example, we take the shofar, when we blow the shofar, Hashem gets up from the throne of din and sits on the throne of rachamim. Why? Because we appeal, this is the shofar, right? This idea of the shofar also, that in our Mesa, we call Hashem from pain. Because we feel the pain of the neshama, we feel the pain of Hashem even. And therefore we connect to a very deep level of compassion within Hashem, that He's ready to transcend the justice, ready to transcend the din, and give rachamim. So rachamim comes from higher than Seder Shloshus. In Seder Shloshus it goes to the middle of Tiferes, right? But we know that all the middle ones go straight up. They go to Keser, they go to higher than Seder Shloshus. That's where they're rooted, because they're a combination of both. In other words, notwithstanding that there's din, Hashem is able to combine that with great compassion, and therefore He transcends compassion. Right? Yeah? Now, this is highlighted on Yom Neroy, but Geras HaTshuva, this series that Alter Rebbe wrote wasn't for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur only, it was for the whole year round. Right? So he says, "V'zman ha'mesugol hazeh." When is the good time to do this? When is the good time to actually reflect and feel the pain and the compassion that the neshama needs and even Hashem needs, so to speak? He says, "U'betikun chatzos." It's supposed to be done in the middle of the night. Tikun chatzos. I'll explain in a minute. Now, there is a thing in Sidurim. If you look in the Siddur, I don't know if you ever saw it. There's something called Tikun chatzos, which nowadays most people don't do. And it's in Israel you have certain great people or special people that do this, especially during the 3 weeks. So this concept at the middle of the night is a very, very special time. It's a time of tshuva, time of thing. Also a time to remember the golus. So in the Siddur there's a thing where some people get up in the middle of the night, and it's a whole seder. Some people do it at the Koisel, some people do it by a doorplace. It's like a whole thing where you mourn the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, right? And you mourn the golus of the neshama and the golus of the Shechina. That's why it's a good time to feel this pain. Now, it's another time to arouse that compassion and to feel the yearning and for us to feel the pain and so on. However, it's written in many Sfarim that nowadays we're not on the level to do it at Tikkun Chatzos, and it's not a good time for us to do it, and you need to be really sensitive, spiritually sensitive to understand the process of Tikkun Chatzos, right? And the Rebbe Rashab wrote that this idea of Tikkun Chatzos that the Rebbe is referring to over here was only reserved for very big Hasidim or very big people. So there's a I mean, it can be done any time. There's this concept of this reflection, but Hasidim used to say that where it should be done is in Kriya Shema Shalamita, in the Shema before we go to sleep, because that's the day you're supposed to reflect on the day, and that's a good time to reflect and to do what the Alter Rebbe is saying here, to arouse that compassion that the neshama needs. Right? Okay. And to mourn and feel the pain for Golus Hashchina, right? Now, even before we get to the next part, which is a bit more sort of strong, it's always important to understand that all of this has nothing to do with serving Hashem b'simcha, right? Simcha is a constant. We have to always Hashem b'simcha. And all of this should not be a contradiction to simcha, because it sounds a little bit depressive, like, you sit down, you feel the compassion, the pain of the neshama, kind of could put you into a different kind of mood, right? It doesn't, it could put you in a mood that is not necessarily consistent with simcha. But it's something that the Alter Rebbe already addressed in the first part of Tanya. We haven't got there yet. We're getting there slowly. We're in chapter 20. This is in chapter 26 and 27, where the Alter Rebbe talks about the concept of merirus, the concept of bitterness and tshuva and how you feel that, right? And Alter Rebbe says that there is a place for that. Sometimes we need to feel really uncomfortable. That's part of the tshuva process. We need to feel the pain of the neshama. But it needs to be done that's why he says, when do you do it? What do you say? You can ask, what do you mean, when do you do it? Do it anytime, right? The answer is you're not supposed to do it anytime. It's an uncomfortable process. It's a time you're supposed to do it at a designated time. It can be in Krishma before you go to bed. It can be during davening, wherever, or a chapter of Tehillim, wherever you do this, but it should be at a reserved time. And it should be controlled. You go through that process, you feel that discomfort, you feel that pain, and then you move on with simcha. Why? What's the simcha? I mean, after I've just beat myself up like that and felt the pain of the neshama, like, how can I be with simcha? Because the truth is, this is an amazingly positive process. It's not negative at all. Even though it doesn't sound particularly positive. But why is it amazingly positive? Because it's the opportunity of tshuva. This whole thing is about hope. The whole thing is about that I have the opportunity to, the neshama, yes, the neshama was come down, the neshama was thrown into jail, the neshama was captured, particularly when we do the wrong thing, but we can fix it. There is rachamim. There is yidgul b'lis rachamim. Hashem has given us this constant gift of tshuva. A yearning to return to Hashem, to reconnect to Hashem. And that turning, when we reconnect to Hashem, we come closer to Hashem stronger than we were before. Right? We've gone through this many, many times, and that is, yes, the process does include an area of discomfort, but it's actually to activate a greater connection to Hashem that was there before. Because when we understand the distance between us and Hashem, right, the yearning becomes stronger. And then when we reconnect, we deepen our relationship with Hashem. Each year, each time we do tshuva, each time we do, especially around Rosh Hashanah and Kippur time. Right? Which is the idea of the shofar. The shofar is a cry from the most deepest part of our neshama, because we feel such after our whole cheshbon during Elul, we feel incredibly distant. So what happens? What's the result? A love that we didn't have before. An incredible love we didn't have before. Because we're so distant, therefore, that we feel the pain so much that we have this yearning and this arousal of compassion to such a big degree that we call to Hashem from the very depths of where we are, and through that we create a deeper relationship. That's how tshuva works, right? So it's not, on the contrary, that's why tshuva has to be b'simcha. Obviously, there's times where the simcha is more reserved. That's what Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, it's more serious, more solemn, but it's not that day of sadness. There's only one period of sadness in the Jewish calendar, and that's Tisha B'Av, right? Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is not Tisha B'Av, on the contrary. It's time of great simcha. Yom Kippur is called the Yom Tov even. It's expressed in a more solemn way, because this is the process of tshuva. The happiness part really comes out more in Sukkot, but it's a process of simcha. It's a process of rebuilding a relationship. It's an amazing opportunity, right? Okay. So that's the first thing we've got to do. Then we come to the second thing. Go to number 2. Vehabeis. The second thing we need to do. Levatesh. I see how you translate levatesh, to like knock down. Ulachnia and subdue. HaKlippa v'sitra achra. The klippa and the sitra achra. What he's referring to really is the nefesh habamis. In other words, like this. Yes, got to feel the pain of the neshama. We've got to create mercy on the neshama, compassion on the neshama. But for the neshama to really free itself and to really be able to express its yearning and express its reconnection with Hashem, right? It needs the nefesh habamis to get out of the way.
Rabbi, is this the straight part of true and straight?
Yeah, now we're getting to the straight part. Up to now was the idea of emes. Emes is a flow of tiferes. It's more to do with chesed. The Rabbi Yitzchak, the Rebbe's father, talks in Kabbalistic terms that the first part, the emes, is tiferes, and the second part is yesod, just before malchus, because they're both in the middle line, right? They're the second one of the and the middle one of the first triangle, chesed gvura tiferes, is more chesed orientated. The second triangle, the yesod, is more gvura orientated. That's how it works, right? This is difficult, this is more painful in a way. Because we have a nefesh habamis. The nefesh habamis has a big ego. It's an ego that has led us and caused us to stray in the first place. Right? So we have to, once in a while, we've got to actually keep the nefesh habamis under control. Right? Now, at tzaddik, as we learned in free at tzaddik, which none of us are tzaddikim, we're not even benyamin, but the tzaddik eventually is able to transform the nefesh habamis completely, right? We're not able to do that. We have the constant struggle. The benyamin has the constant struggle, and the aspiring benyamin for sure has the constant struggle, right? And to make sure that the struggle is successful in the right way, especially when it comes to the idea of tshuva, we have to actually knock down the yeshus, the arrogance, the klippa, the strength of the klippa of the nefesh habamis. The Rebbe says in the first part of Tanya also, we haven't come to that yet. He quotes over there Zohar. The Zohar says that he says if you have a big, thick plank of wood. See, because let me say one thing before. Because really what happens is like this. Sometimes a person can really understand the pain of the neshama, and sometimes it doesn't matter. He understands it intellectually, but he's not able to express it. He's not moved. Still stuck. Why still stuck? Not because of the neshama. Still stuck because of the nefesh habamis. So the Zohar says that he says a piece of plank of wood that you light it with a fire. You know, you do a barbecue with logs of wood and it won't light. So what are you going to do? Mevachinle, you got to chop it up into small splinters. Right? Says the Zohar, same thing with the guf. Gufa de loisalik, a body that just refuses to become inspired. That the arrogance prevents any form of inspiration. Mevachinle, you got to chop it up a little bit. You got to beat it into place. Right? This is what he says. He says, Rabbi, the second thing to do is levatesh olachnia haklippa v'sitra achra. You've got to knock down to a certain degree. We'll explain in a minute what this means, right? V'sitra achra, through the concept of sitra, the sitra achra klippa. Asher kol chayusa, because the whole life force of that nefesh habamis, gasus v'agbo, it's about arrogance and it's about haughtiness. Like it says in Tagbiyah Kanesher, it lifts itself up like an eagle in an arrogant way. There's a pasuk that says like that, right? The habitush v'achno, therefore the knocking it down ad offer. Mamush, you got to beat it down. You got to beat it into pulp, so to speak. Zui misosa mitula. That's how you knock it. That's how you kill it, so to speak. That's how you get it out of the way, so it lets the expression of the nefesh habamis, of the nefesh lekesam. I'm going to explain this in a minute, which he uses very strong words. He says, V'hainu. This means, Al yedei leiv nishbar v'nitke, through a broken heart. There's nivze be'enov, and a disdain almost, for the nefesh habamis, for the arrogance of the animal soul. Now, it's a little bit of a confusing thing because there's a famous, and that's what we'll say in a second, we'll talk in a second, why, for example, especially nowadays, we don't, because he says later, let's just go a little bit later. Let's go to number 3. Right? Let's go to number 3. And I'm going to explain afterwards. He says, how do you have that broken heart? In other words, how do you break the arrogance of Nefesh Habamis? A little bit is through fasting, only a little bit, because we can't fast a lot. Like King David, where it says over there, he said, I actually managed to completely eradicate the clip of the Nefesh Habamis because Shaharga B'tainis. The Gemara says, David HaMelech eradicated, not only got out of the way, he eradicated the clip of the Nefesh Habamis because he killed it with fasting. Right? Now we don't even do that. We don't even fast a little bit today, as we'll soon see. But he's going to explain that how we do it today is not through fasting, but we do it today through reflection, to understand what we've done, to understand the severity of what we've done. Now, let's just put this all together before we go further. First of all, nowadays we shouldn't add any fasting. The Rebbe was incredibly against fasting for tshuva. We have the fast days we're supposed to fast, al pi halacha. Sometimes we're not able to because we're weak, whatever the case is. But there's the halachic fast, the 5, whatever it is, halachic fast during the week, and that's where it stops. First reason is because today we're very weak, and any additional fasting will just detract from serving Hashem and not add to it at all, right? The Rebbe, there's many letters of the Rebbe where the Rebbe talks about fasting and how it shouldn't be done today and it's no good and it's not the way of the Baal Shem Tov. There's a beautiful letter, I'll just read it to you. There was a person that wrote to the Rebbe that really wants to do tshuva and he really wants to fast, and he's thinking of a series of fasts every Monday and Thursday, whatever, because that's people used to fast for tshuva would do it Monday and Thursday, right? And they writes to him, absolutely not. And the Rebbe says, and this goes to the heart of what I'm going to back to explain, he says, instead of afflicting your body, why don't you make your nefesh habamis uncomfortable? Now, there's a difference between the body and the nefesh habamis. The body is what nefesh habamis gives life to. Nefesh habamis is the source, the soul of the nefesh habamis. That's the real clipper, right? He says, what do you mean? What do I mean? You want to fast? Don't hold back from food and drink that is necessary for the health of your body. Instead, fast by, what is fast? Fast is an affliction. Makes us uncomfortable. Make your nefesh habamis uncomfortable. Meaning, designate days where you're not going to eat things that you need to eat, that you don't need to eat, right? Or you're not going to talk idle talk. You want to fast? So spend the day in more davening, learning. Hold yourself back from indulgence. Hold yourself back from, stupid talk or that kind of thing, right? Basically, it's a fast not of the body but of the nefesh habamis. That's what you do. So what does this mean? Because people confuse this a lot with this following idea. There's a famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, which the Rebbe always used to quote, particularly with regard to not fasting nowadays, right? Because one thing about not fasting, like the Rebbe says, not to be unhealthy, but it's more than that. It's a bit deeper than that. Because when we learn Chassidus, we realize that as much as we possibly can, of course, it'll always be the struggle, the nefesh habamis, but as much as we can, we need to bring the body along with the ride of serving Hashem, right? And the Baal Shem Tov taught this, and what did he do? He taught it based on a pasuk. It's a pasuk which we had, I think, last week's parsha. Where one of the 613 mitzvahs is that if you see someone who's trying to offload or upload a donkey, right, you have to help them. Yeah, it's one of the 613 mitzvahs. Even if you don't like them. It's a mitzvah, you have to help them. So what does it say? It says like this. The pasuk said, I'll just say the pasuk and I'll explain how the Baal Shem Tov explained it. Kisire shoyer or chamor. If you see an ox or a donkey, soin achva that belongs to your enemy, right? And the guy is struggling. He's trying to upload, offload, whatever the case is. V'chodalta ma'azoiv lo, says the pasuk, and you entertain the thought that maybe I'm not going to help him. I'm not going to help his friend. Right? Says the pasuk, no, you must help him. Ozor tazor imay. Help him together with him. Bring him along. He's got to participate also. The owner of the donkey, but help him and help him do it together with him. Right? That's what the pasuk says. That's the simple mitzvah. Said the Baal Shem Tov, this has got to do with the relation between the neshama and the guf. Said the Baal Shem Tov, Kisira chamor. When you see a donkey, what does a donkey mean? The word chamor comes from the word chumrius, physicality, coarseness. In Yiddish we say grobkeit, right? It's the mundaneness. Oivecha, and you see that it's your enemy. It is your enemy. Naturally, the default position of a person is that his nefesh abamis and his animal soul and his body is standing in the way of his spiritual growth. Right? We get up in the morning, most of us have a default position, we'd rather eat pizza than learn a page of Gemara. Okay, that's just the way it is. Or whatever that stands for. I don't mean specifically pizza, but I mean the concept, right? We'd rather enjoy life than have to learn a daven. That's our default consciousness, right? So what are you going to think? Says the pasuk. V'chodalta ma'azoylo. You're going to refrain from helping it. What are you going to do? You're going to attack it. You're going to beat up the body. You're going to attack the body. You're going to undermine the body. Says Baal Shem Tov, no, says the pasuk. Ozoiv tazoiv imay. Work with the body. Bring it along on the ride. Make sure it's strong so that it can serve Hashem better. So it's part of serving Hashem, right? So I've heard people interpret that teaching, that what Alter Rebbe is teaching us, what Hashem is teaching us, is that the Nefesh Abam is essentially a good thing, which is not true. Nefesh Abam is klipper. Okay? It's klipper when we're born, even before we've done anything wrong. The fact that it's physical and it feels an independent existence, that's already klipper, right? So how does that teaching of Hashem to fit, in any way, how does that teaching of Hashem to fit into what the Alter Rebbe is saying here? He's saying you got to beat it up, you got to subdue it, you got to scream it, you got who knows what, right? The answer is very simple. The answer is it's talking about it's the difference between the body and the nefesh habamis. We don't fast today. The body is holy. The problem is the body is driven by the nefesh habamis. And the way the body is in its default position is sanach. It is your enemy. He's trying to stop you. Our bodily needs, our bodily desires are trying to stop us from keeping Torah mitzvahs. But we can bring it along the ride. The problem is that it's driven by a nefesh habamis, which is klippa, which is ego, which is egocentricity, right? And that has to be beaten down. Therefore, and this is interesting. This is interesting the way it comes up in the words of the Rebbe in that letter about the person fasting. He said, "Don't afflict your body, afflict your nefesh habamis." It's different, right? Yeah.
But I thought the nefesh habamis is what keeps us alive. Like it's the part that ensures we eat and we drink and we sleep.
Yeah, no, it gives us life, but it also gives us our desires, our passion. So of course, the desire to eat is intrinsically is not a bad thing. It depends what you eat and how you eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the arrogance of the nefesh habamis, the selfishness of the nefesh habamis, the klippa of the nefesh habamis. That's pure klippa. You need to beat that down.
So is it bad or is it good? I mean, we need all those things.
We need a very small dose of it. You know, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, famous Gemara, very beautiful Gemara. The Gemara says that Anshe Knesset HaGedolah got together. These were great people, 120 men of Nevi'im and prophets, and they wanted to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. That's what it says. They wanted to get rid of the Yetzer Hara completely from the world. And it says they davened to Hashem, and Hashem said, "Okay, they captured the Yetzer Hara. Finished. No more Yetzer Hara." Next morning, everyone woke up, and there was no eggs in the marketplace. Why? Because chickens weren't living with roosters. There's no Yetzer Hara anymore. Right? No physical desire anymore. So they realized, no, that's not the way the world works. Can't do that. So they asked Hashem to bring back the Yetzer Hara, right? Except they were successful in one thing. They were successful in killing the Yetzer Hara for avodah zarah, for actual idol worship. Because you know, the first Beis HaMikdash was a very big problem. And afterwards, the problem sort of went away, at least in the level of bowing down to images. Okay, so we have other avodah zarahs today, but this avodah zarah, this bizarre avodah zarah of taking a statue and bowing down to it, things that sometimes we can't even understand, although it is done in parts of the world, but generally people don't do that. Is they were able successfully to tone that down. The pshat is like this: that in other words, what you're talking about is the physical, the idea of taiva. Like the Maral Prak says that desire and you say, and a certain amount of all these things is an integral part of the person's human existence. But the selfishness, the driver, that's like the chesed of the nefesh habamis can be controlled. In other words, yes, a desire to do something physical, a desire to eat, a hunger, whatever the case is. But it needs to be driven and guided by the nefesh halakis, not the nefesh habamis. And our default position is that it's guided by the nefesh habamis, meaning the ego of the nefesh habamis, the clip of the nefesh habamis. And that's what we have to beat down. Now again, this is not every day, this is not all day, but it has a place. That idea of cheshbon hanefesh, the idea of cheshbon hanefesh, to really reflect about what our nefesh habamis has been up to and what it's been doing, and the impact that it's had. That's an important part of the tshuva process. It's uncomfortable, and it brings to a broken heart. Not broken heart as we think about broken heart like despair. Never brings to despair. You know that. If it ever brings to despair, it's not a good thing. It brings to a feeling of pain, yes. And that feeling of pain should activate urgency. I think I've told you the story before. There was a great mashpia, very clever mashpia, great mashpia, mentor in the Friedrich Rebbe's times, Rebbe Rashap's times, and the Friedrich Rebbe. His name was Chatsche Fagen, Rabbi Cheskel Fagen. Great chassid, an unbelievable, deep chassid. I think my father's father, his Talmud was learned by him. And he was once sitting with Bachrim, and he was farbrengi. And they were singing Nigunim, and he was talking, and he was really trying to get them to move a little bit, right? Trying to get them to move. To stir, to come out of their complacency. And it worked. They became very inspired, and they started singing Nigun after Nigun, and they started to cry, because the neshama was moved. Suddenly, this was under communism, and under the communist regime, we had to be very careful. Suddenly there was a noise, and everyone thought, oh, we have a visitor. This was very common in those days, right? Suddenly everything stopped, trying to action, hid the evidence, I don't know, the food, the mashka, I don't know exactly what it was. Made as if they were just playing a game or something. And then it turned out to be a false alarm. It was some cat making some noise somewhere that was really nothing. And they were really enjoying the Farbrengen, so they regrouped, and they tried to sort of, they brought out L'chaim again, and they put the food there, and they started singing Nigun again. They tried to reconnect to the mood that was before the false alarm, and he started to scream at them. He said, it was as a real mentor's trick, right? Because he was the one that brought him to that in the first place. But he started screaming at them, and he said, when you had a slight suspicion that there was danger, you sprung into action. But when it was about your neshama, you were crying. You weren't doing anything. He says, what he was trying to say, nothing wrong with crying. Of course, we cry. There's the shofar, and the Rizal says that, you're supposed to cry on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but whatever that means, but, right, we're supposed to at least feel something stir. But it always has to be, and that's the difference between what the Alter Rebbe speaks in the beginning, in the first part of Tanya, in chapter 26, the difference between merirus and atzvus. Merirus is bitterness, and atzvus is sadness. He says atzvus is always bad, because it just brings despair. The broken heart he's talking about here is not sadness. It's what he calls there bitterness, meaning it's not bitter that we use bitter like a very bitter person. No, it means over there it's like a feeling of real pain and discomfort, which creates a sense of urgency. I need to do something about this. I need to reconnect. I need to work on my ego. I need to get the clip out of the way. That's what it is, right? That's what I say, because he's using the word leiv nishbar, a broken heart. Yes, there's a place for it. Not even that shouldn't be all the time. Alter Rebbe says only be controlled times, right? Guilt has a place, but only if you're in control of it, right? That's what he says. How do you do what he says? It's lios, like just number 3 over there. Mimore de chushbana, to be masters of reflection. To really go deeply in binase, in your das, in your bina, shah achas b'chol yoyim, at a certain time every day, or laila, or at night, if not tzikun chatzois, again, back to this chatzois, right? Lizboinein, to just think about mashapal ve'osa b'chator, what your nefesh habamis did. The first part is we were trying to think of what happened to the neshama. Okay, so we're feeling bad for the neshama. We're feeling compassion for the neshama. Now we're looking at the culprit. Look what the nefesh habamis did, right? Because Golus HaShechina, the Nefesh HaBamis is the one that caused the Golus of the Shechina. So the first part was feeling bad for the Neshama, so to activate the yearning of the Neshama. The second party is beating up the culprit. Look what you did. Which means us, in other words. Because, as he explains in the first part of Tanya, this is an important part to understand, by the way, that what's our identity? Who are we? The Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Abamis. Sorry? Yes, correct. So, deep down, deep down, which we reveal in Rosh Hashanah with the Nefesh Elokis. True. But most people, consciously, the Nefesh Abamis. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. Because he says that Hillel, the famous Hillel, said, when he used to go eat, he used to say, we're going to now bestow kindness upon the poor. Why? Because Hillel was such a tzaddik. Who was he? Hillel was a Nefesh Elokis. No, once in a while, he needs to do his Nefesh Abamis a favor and feed it. So he would say, before he would eat, he would say, let's do chesed imho aluva. Let's do kindness with the Nebuch one. Right? Referring to his Nefesh Abamis. Because Hillel was a Nefesh Elokis. He was such a tzaddik, right? But most of us are not like that. We are the Nefesh Abamis. The I, the conscious I should say, is Nefesh Abamis, right? So when we talk about this cheshbon, not we're saying what someone else did to the Shekhinah, what we did to the Shekhinah. Take responsibility. And that's an important part. We need to feel uncomfortable once in a while. We need to take responsibility. This is not quite in line.
Though, we're recognizing that the I that we identify with, so we identify with the Nefesh Abamis, but the true I is the Nefesh Abamis.
Yeah, that's why the first part was to have Rahmanas on the true I. The second part is to beat up on Nefesh Abamis, the ego of a Nefesh Abamis, the clip of Nefesh Abamis, which is us.
That's who we consciously identify with, but it's not really us.
Yeah, but correct. But that's our consciousness, right? So we can't shy away from it.
But we live in consciousness.
Right? We can't say, I'm okay because I'm Nefesh Elokis. No, you're not. Right? You weren't your Nefesh Elokis when you did the Aveira, right?
But the only reason you can do tshuva is because you are not your Nefesh Elokis.
Of course. That's why the Alter Rebbe says in the beginning, this is part of the first part of Tanya where he speaks about this. And he says that's why we have to hold two things. That's what the Zohar says. We can cry and laugh at the same time. Because we feel the pain because our Nefesh Abamis, and that's the conscious I. But we feel happiness because we know they're really deep down with the Nefesh Elokis, and we're going to schlep it out, and the Nefesh Elokis is going to prevail, which is what happens in Rosh Hashanah. I mean, he's talking about everyday tshuva, but I'm talking about now like the yearly tshuva, right? The big tshuva. Because we reveal the Nefesh Elokis, and that's what comes out. Correct.
So with excision, actually, you are only your Nefesh Abamis.
No, excision is cutting off Nefesh Elokis, that's the thing.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm talking
at
about.
that point you...
Yeah. Which I can't. That's in Thomas Beis Hamikdash that you couldn't live. Yeah. Okay. Right.
I have a question back about the Nefesh Abamis. Is it not deeply sourced in a higher level than...
Yeah, I know what you're asking. Yeah. So in the Seder Hishtalshelus, as we call it, that's a very different discussion. So there's the Nefesh Abamis is much lower than Nefesh Elokis and has a higher source on some level, meaning within the system of creations, there's something called the world of chaos, Olam HaTohu, and the world of Tikkun, the world of orderly. So the world of chaos is like Nefesh Abamis originates in the world of chaos, which is actually higher than the world of Tikkun. But ultimately, the Nefesh Elokis is much higher. It's sourced in the essence of Hashem, which is much higher, of course. So, which is a different shir. I mean, one day we'll get that shir, but it needs to be understood properly. What that means. But that's true, and that's why it's so important that being Nefesh Abamis along, because Nefesh Abamis has certain strengths that even Nefesh Elokis doesn't have, because it comes from the world of chaos, which is it's a chaotic world, but it's a very powerful world. Yeah. Okay, but that's not to do with this. We're talking about the Harry here. Right? So that's what it says. So it says it comes through Cheshbon HaNefesh, and if you go over the page, he says that, and part of the Cheshbon is, and he goes through the whole thing now. I'll just say it outside because it's getting late. He goes through the whole thing where he says that it's not only, the Cheshbon is not only about the very severe things that we did, that carry kores, as we said before, that cuts off the neshama, but even small things, and he gives that moshel, he says, right? Because sometimes we call averis, we call it things that we've done wrong, whether it's between us and Hashem, or between us and people, right? It's like a mechitza, it's like we've created a barrier between us and Hashem, right? So sometimes we do very big things that are no good, we create a big barrier. But sometimes we only create a thin curtain. So for example, you put a thin curtain on the window, right? That's how, in our davening Yom Kippur, we compare our various to like these clouds or thin clouds, thick clouds. What does it all mean? If you have a thin cloud or a thin barrier, or a thin blind on the, you have these blinds that they put like, it gives you a bit of privacy, but it still lets in the sunlight, right? Yeah, so it's a thin one, right? So it's only a thin a thin damage, a thin stain. But if you put a lot of them there, if you do it continuously and you keep piling up the little blinds, it's going to create darkness, right? The same thing he talks about what he calls Averos color. It's like simple, small things that we do wrong, which we think are nothing, and we just do them, right? But if you pile them up, they become problematic, and even Gemara says that they really are problematic. For example, someone just doesn't give tzedakah, or someone, talking lashon hara continuously, or he says, for example, anger. We know the Gemara says anger is like avodah zarah. Now, it says like avodah zarah. Obviously, we don't call the person got angry an idol worshipper, but it carries subtly the concept of avodah zarah, right? And also, particularly idea because it's got to do with arrogance, the particular idea of learning Torah, the importance of learning Torah, and so on and so forth. So that's how we do it. We set aside time to really reflect and build up that sort of regret of what we've done and what our nefesh habamis has caused, and take responsibility for it. And the combination of those two things, which understanding the pain of the nefesh habamis and understanding how we've caused that pain, and therefore what kind of real rahmanas it is on the nefesh habamis, and the responsibility that we need to take, meaning the conscious we, the nefesh habamis, right, to actually take responsibility for causing that pain. That creates a broken heart, it creates a yearning, it creates we call a bitush, splintering the wood, and that gives room there to be stirred and to be think, right? Now again, obviously this is it's not quite in line with modern thinking, all this stuff, but it's important. And the Rebbe would always teach us that of course this has a place, but today obviously it needs to be always, because it's different, right? You see, in previous generations they would go through this process, and it was a given to them that it's not meant to beat us down, it's not meant to weaken us, it's meant to create urgency, it's meant to create strength. And the older Hasidim, some of which was from the last generation, some of which that I knew, were people that would cry when they would do the Kriya Shema at night, and they would go through this process, and yet during the day they were the happiest people, right? Because this should lead to amazing simcha, that Hashem has given us the process, He's given us the responsibility to go through that, right? Today we are a weak generation, so while this process still implies, but the emphasis has to be more simcha. That's what the Rebbe does explain, and we always have to remind ourselves this is positive. This is not a bad thing. This is all about positivity. It's all about Hashem welcoming us back. It's all Hashem understanding that we fail and not judging us and really wanting us just to reconnect. We have work to do. Of course, we've got work to do, and that work does include some discomfort, and that's okay. But it's positive discomfort, and it needs to be even tshuva can be with simcha. So while this does apply, and of course it applies, and we need to have a dose of it, but we should be careful that it doesn't lead to negative guilt and negative sadness and negative despondency or despair, because nowadays it is very possible for that to happen. So both things are true. We shouldn't ignore this, of course. It's part of Torah and it's part of Tanya. But on the other hand, we need to put into perspective and how to apply it nowadays, that it must be done in a very, very positive and uplifting way. Part of it is uncomfortable, there's no question. There's no getting away from that. We need to sometimes beat the nefesh habamis down, right? And understand, recognize our own arrogance, recognize our own weaknesses, recognize the effect of what we do, but at the same time it all comes with that Hashem is forgiving, and Hashem wants us to return, Hashem wants our tshuva, and so on and so forth. So that's all part of the lower level of tshuva. And next week we'll get to the high level of tshuva ilah, which is actually more positive, but it's much more, but it's more difficult because it's a high level of connection, it's a deeper connection with Hashem. And we'll see how. Sorry?